It's my life. Lazy. It's my life. I got dirty. It's my life.
Welcome back to Collect 'em All or Die Trying, the spoiler room, comic cliff notes. Previously on Tom Taylor's Dark Ages, a being of immense power called the Unmaker was sealed away inside the Earth. Billions of years later, the Unmaker awakened and began to destroy the planet from within, causing massive destruction. Earth's heroes went on a small strike force to combat the threat. Doctor Strange released an EMP wave that halted the Unmaker. However, with Strange now dead, the portal remained open and the EMP wave encompassed the entire planet, wiping out all electricity. Now, 7 years later, the survivors have formed a new society without the use of technology or electricity, but other, darker forces are at work. It has been years since the age of technology ended in a single moment, like a switch had been flickered to off for the entire planet. Now, Earth's heroes attempt to bring humanity together in the darkness. X-Men and the Avengers, vigilantes and villains, all work together to create something better. But something darker than the night is descending on the world. And now the post-apocalyptic world is about to face apocalypse. Welcome back to Dark Ages, Part 2. Unlike the last issue, this issue opens up on the post-apocalyptic war-ridden streets that was forced upon everybody. After the world went dark, people were scared and grieving, and their fear and hurt turned into anger. There were wars fought over borders, resources, ideologies. It was utter chaos. Between the initial earthquakes and the loss of power and the wars, billions and billions of lives were lost in the process. But then, cutting through all that fear, rage, and chaos came a voice of calm, and a message started to spread. Individuals like Jean Grey, Laura Kinney, T'Challa, Shang-Chi, and even Deadpool became the voice of reason, saying it doesn't have to be like this. Put down the weapons, imagine something better. And Deadpool being the voice of reason in a classic Deadpool fashion as he approaches General Ross and he's like, hey, so a few of my friends and I are brainstorming, or we have a thought. Up for hearing it? Or should I just go ahead and ram this sword in your eye socket? Even individuals like Miss Marvel, who's breaking up fights and riots in the streets against rival factions, and Captain America, being Captain America, running around telling people the story about how he sees whales in the Hudson again. Whatever, Cap. But you got America's ass. And don't forget about Xavier, who's using his telepathy to reach minds around the world, trying to convince everybody that a post-apocalyptic world doesn't have to be a bad place. And then we jump over to Little May Parker, who's not so little anymore. And she's playing the game of hide and seek with Peter and is quite upset that she got caught. But Peter explains to her, hey, look, you were swinging around talking about woohoo! Like, that makes you a lot easier to locate. It's a very loud hole in your stealthy plan. And MJ walks by telling them it's time to come inside. It's time to get home. And Peter goes on to explain how, honestly, things are a whole lot better. It became a more decent place to raise a family. With a smaller population, without electricity, industrialization, and mass production, the world started coming back from the brink of climate destruction. People fled the most inhospitable places and came to the most thriving centers. What was left of humanity sheltered from the darkness together. These super cities were each linked by a powerful telepath. Brazil, Australia, Nepal, and even Wakanda all had a powerful telepath. So while the world was divided in distance, it was also connected by people who opened their minds and hid nothing from each other, all with a common goal. The center of this new world, Earth's capital, was Wakanda, where a council of the greatest and best of minds innovated every day in the city, all linked together by Jean Grey. Lunella Lafayette, who we know as Moon Girl, Shuri, Tony Stark, Valeria Richards, T'Challa, Nadia Van Dyne, Amadeus Cho, and Victor Von Doom joined the greatest of non-power thinkers, They reimagined what the world could be. They could dream up lighting and refrigeration, whole new systems of food production and preservation, shelter and governance. Together, they created a post-apocalyptic utopia. But the biggest question was, how did they protect this utopia? And they protected these city centers much like medieval times, only instead of using moats, they used webs attached to bells, and this surrounded the entire radius of the center cities. So if anything tried to get through or past these webs, much like a spider web, it'll send vibrations, which would ring the bells by these watchtowers surrounding the city. And a bell goes off in one of the watchtowers containing Daredevil and Foggy, and Daredevil confirms that there's danger headed towards the southwest corner of the city, and Foggy thinks he should throw up a flare, but Daredevil's like, there's really no need to send up a flare, and I don't blame him, considering who they got in the southwest corner of the city, protecting the area. And a bloodthirsty creature of the night is something I wouldn't want to be. And of course, with the lights going out across the world, darkness thrived. The night horde raids were frequent, but they had protectors who were far more fearsome and far more scarier than any monster. And before any vibration or bell sound can go off, Laura Kenny, aka X-23, aka Wolverine, and Honey Badger, also known as Gabby, already had a whiff of werewolves and vampires in the air. And accompanied by Blade and Black Widow, this fight was over before it even started. And then our attention is pulled away to a remote cave where Pepper Potts and Tony Stark is basically just listening to the sounds of Blade killing werewolves and vampires. Then they're interrupted by a vampire who casually walks into the cave, and before he can even finish Tony Stark's name, he's decapitated by Steve Rogers. You know, and I have to agree with Cap. You would think a brilliant inventor would just invent the door. And it's nothing but a warm welcome, because it's been far too long since the last time Steve has seen Pepper Potts and Tony Stark. And in this brief interaction with Tony and Cap in the cave, we find out that with no light or technology available, Tony's pretty much just become an alchemist. And Cap has been spending a lot of his time in Europe, which is still ruled by an iron fist. And Cap asks Tony that they need to talk. Let's go for a walk. Then we transition to their conversation outside the cave, and Cap feels very surprised that Tony is content without electricity or technology and that he would feel held back. And honestly, Tony admits that he lies awake at night creating things in his mind, machines that could transform the world that would never be shut off. And this is the first time we get a shot of Tony's full body. And he's walking with a cane, and it looks like he has a prosthetic leg. And I'm guessing that back in issue 1, when the first EMP blast went off and Tony's power suit shut off and he continued to fall from the sky, I believe in the collision he lost his leg. Now Tony cuts the small talk and asks his Cap if he's asking him to go to war with Europe. But Cap thinks there's another solution. Like, what if? What if you could switch on all the machines running in your mind? And I don't know if Tony is skeptical or intrigued, but nonetheless, Cap says he wants to show him something. And as soon as Tony gets an image of Apocalypse and Dracula standing on the other side of what Cap needs to show him, he pulls out a grenade and takes out some of Dracula's minions. And Dracula's just too fast for Tony, especially now that he's only on one leg. And Dracula goes on to commemorate Tony for being a good killer and taking out some of the vampires that have been serving him for centuries. Now Tony looks over at Cap and pleads for him to get Dracula off, and Cap says no, and with one swift swing of his shield, he knocks Tony unconscious. Then we discover that it was Mystique posing as Cap the whole time to lure Tony out into an ambush, and it was a success. Then Tony wakes up in Europe with Apocalypse standing before him, who's admiring Tony and telling him that he has a mind that's beyond human. And he goes on to confess that he thought mutants were the only species worth preserving. And Apocalypse suggests Tony work for him, but Tony declines, saying he's always had a firm rule about not working for people who have slaves build them statues. But Apocalypse has a sly remark in return. Like, were your Iron Man suits not shiny tributes to yourself? And were the medals not mined by slaves in other countries and lands? Like, come on, Tony, don't put yourself on a high moral pedestal than everybody else. And Apocalypse goes on to tell Tony that he needs to understand evolution, and that evolution uses and kills the inferior and undeserving, and there can be no progress with the world, rendered stagnant, and that it's time for evolution. And as he's entering the building, Reed is shocked, because right before his eyes, he sees Riri and Reed, and he's like, dude, we thought you were dead. We gave up searching. Sue thinks you're dead. Like, what are you doing here? And Reed's response is, I'm doing anything I can to help. We've been given a chance. And Tony can't help himself because he starts asking questions. The power running in here. How have you done this? And Apocalypse responds like, how would you do it? And once again, Tony can't help himself. He's in his element. And he goes on to say it's a Faraday cage, immune to the constant EMP, but every cage he's ever built has failed. He's used adamantium, vibranium, but the electromagnetic pulse in the earth is just way too strong. He needs a magnetic, something equal and as strong as to repel it. And Apocalypse responds, something? No, someone. And Tony's having a hard time bobbing and weaving all these shock and awe moments that keep coming at him from left and right. Because Tony looks up and he's like, Magneto? You're using Magneto as the magnetic force for the EMP? And Apocalypse turns around to give thanks to Kilgrave for all his hard work. And a light bulb goes off in Tony's head when he hears the name Kilgrave, because he turns around, he's like, the Purple Man? And before you know it, Tony's under the mind control of Kilgrave and now working for Apocalypse. Apocalypse touched the mind of a being stronger than a god, and then the earth stopped. And now he wants that power, and Tony Stark is gonna help him wake up the Unmaker. Although they knew that Apocalypse was dangerous and that a dictator controlled what was left of a continent, they had no idea the extent of the threat he posed, and they didn't know that he would sacrifice the world to get it. And that concludes Dark Ages Part 2. And don't forget to hit up the comments. Tell me what you think of this issue. What was your favorite part? And how do you feel about Kilgrave showing up at the end of this issue? And if you like this, then hit the like button, hit a subscribe button so you can get more content just like this. Peace.
It's my life.